Just to record my thanks for the Vision for Sidmouth group who have arranged this evening, and I'd ask if you could give a warm welcome to Ian Gregory, who's going to be sharing for us. Can we give him a round of applause?
Thanks very much then, David, for that welcome and introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Hustings event arranged by the Vision Group for Sidmouth. My name is Ian Gregory, and I'm the chairman of the VGS. Historically, the VGS has taken on this role of arranging Hustings events as an impartial, non-politically aligned group. We exist to provide challenge and support to our locally elected representatives, and membership of the VGS is open to all in the residents of the Sid Valley. So if you are interested in knowing more about the VGS, then please look at our website. I'm very pleased to welcome 6 of our 7 prospective parliamentary candidates for the Honiton and Sidmouth constituency. They are Jake Bonetta, Vanessa Coxon, Jake Bonetta, Labour, Vanessa Coxon, Independent, Hazel Exon, Party of Women, Richard Ford, Liberal Democrat, Simon Jupp, Conservative, Paul Crickenden, Reform. The Green Party is unable to attend due to other pre-arranged commitments, but I will be reading a statement from Henry Gent, the Green Party candidate, at the end of the evening. The evening will proceed as follows. Each of the 6 candidates will give a maximum of a 5-minute presentation to start with. The presentations will be given in order based on the alphabetical surname of each candidate. Following those opening speeches, we will then proceed to the question time of the evening. So thank you very much to all those who have submitted questions both online and here this evening. We've had a lot of questions. So please don't be too disappointed if your question is not one that has been selected. But what we plan to do is any questions that we don't have time to answer tonight will be catalogued and presented to the candidates for their written responses, if they have time, later. So that's something we will do, and then they will be made available on the VGS website. We have sought to blend the questions that we've received around themes for the candidates to answer. And I hope that their answers will provide some insight into their thinking on each issue. I want to clearly state that we have been impartial in the selection and presentation of the questions. I will present the questions to the candidates and give each the opportunity to respond. We will not take questions from the floor or comments from the floor this evening, and I would ask you all to respect that. The question time will last around 1 hour, and we will obviously seek to ask as many questions as we can during that time. Following the question time, the candidates will be invited then to make a 2-minute final closing statement. This will be done in the reverse order from the opening presentations, following which we will conclude the event. So let us turn then to the first opening statement, which is from Jake Bonetta. So Jake, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening. My name is Jake Bonetta. I'm the Labour candidate for this constituency this time round. It's pretty clear to me Britain needs change. Let's be clear, this general election has been called because Rishi Sunak is a weak Prime Minister. He has no faith in his own plan. Now he's providing the country an unfunded spending spree of £71 billion in his manifesto. That means higher taxes, higher borrowing, and further entrenched financial burdens for everyday working people like us in this room. I will not let the Tories take us for granted any longer. I've been raised in this constituency my entire life. I've been brought up in Honiton by my 2 loving parents, one of them who's sat in the corner there, who will absolutely hate me for talking about this. My dad runs a garage door business in Honiton and Sidmouth, and my mum works to support him with that. I went to school at Honiton Primary, and then I was lucky enough to get a position in Colleton Grammar School. I've worked in businesses in Honiton and Sidmouth throughout my working life, including a supermarket I don't think I can legally name up the road here in Sidmouth during the COVID pandemic. I now work in the community sector, running community connecting for a local authority, and also supporting the work of a food redistribution organisation that I set up 3 years ago, covering Honiton, Beer and the Black Downs. I've also worked closely with many organisations across Sid Valley, and I want to pay specific tribute to the work that you do. This place has shaped me, it's made me who I am, and it's given me my values. And today I want to say to you why I want to give that back to the area. As an East Devon District Councillor, I've supported local families with housing casework, preventing homelessness. I've taken people off the streets, and I've made people safe and secure in their own homes through my casework. I've worked very closely with the voluntary community and social enterprise sectors across the constituency. I've expanded equality for all at the council that I've been elected to, was elected to, and I've worked closely with officers and other parties to bring about tangible, positive change. And that's what we need to see, isn't it? Tangible, positive change. As an Honiton Town Councillor, I spent my time turning around a culture of bullying and legal complaints, creating a transparent, healthy and functional council and officer team. If elected as your MP, I want to represent you, not special interests, not lobbying organisations. And I want to make Labour's plan for the area, for the country, work for Honiton and Sidmouth. That means delivering economic stability with tough spending rules so we can grow our economy and keep taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. That means cutting NHS waiting times by opening up 40,000 new appointments per week within our NHS during evenings and weekends, paid for by cracking down on tax avoidance and non-dom loopholes. That means launching a new border security command with hundreds of new specialist investigators to use counter-terror powers to smash the criminal boat gangs that are so badly getting involved in our system and breaking a lot of humanitarian rules. It means setting up Great British Energy, a publicly owned clean power company, to cut bills for good and boost energy security, paid for by a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. It means cracking down on antisocial behaviour with more neighbourhood police, paid for by ending wasteful contracts, tough new penalties for offenders and a new network of youth hubs. And it also means recruiting 6,500 new teachers in key subjects to prepare children for life, work and the future, not just for exams. Labour's plan makes economic sense, it is fully costed, and it won't increase your taxes. We've been very clear on that. This election may seem like a done deal if you look at the opinion polls, but Labour are not taking anything for granted. No votes in this election have been cast. But if I am to be elected, I want Honiton and Sidmouth to have a seat at the table in government, not in the opposition. Change starts on 4th of July, everywhere in this country. And I promise, if elected, I will help bring that change to Honiton and Sidmouth. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm actually completely winging it this evening because I've been 3 days looking after a toddler and a 6-year-old, and I'm completely exhausted and had no time to prepare. So please just bear with me. I'm standing as your local independent candidate in this election because I feel extremely strongly that independence is the only way we're actually going to get a voice for the people in government. There are actually, I believe, about 400 independent candidates standing throughout the whole country. Dean has said some great stuff there, but actually when it comes to it, how much he will be able to deliver for us all depends on how much his party is going to let him do so. Same with all of our candidates here this evening. I know they all do some great work and have helped an awful lot of people through their their works as MPs. But I also know that they're ruled by their parties and have to toe the party line. I've written several letters myself, and all I get replies back is the party line. I don't have a party that I'm representing or who overlords me, as it were. Dean also mentioned all the lobbying organisations. Sorry, Jake, not Dean. Sorry, I know one of his relatives is Dean. Jake Bonetta had said... he mentioned lobbying organisations in the lobby government, and there is a massive amount of lobbying goes on by large corporations that put a huge amount of money into various different organisations who do all the lobbying for them. I started off my career in my working life working for the Retail Consortium in London, who was a retail trade association lobbying organisation. It's now merged with the British Retailers Association British Retailers Association, now called the British Retail Consortium, I believe, the two merging together. And seen firsthand as a young woman of 18 quite how much power they wielded. In those 40 years, the power that the retail corporations have now and what they've managed to achieve, really at our expense, in lots of ways, making massive profits, is phenomenal. And the power they wield in government is phenomenal. And if that's just the retail trade, petrol industry, everywhere, pharma industry, all have a massive influence in government. And not necessarily, I think, for our benefit. Yeah, sorry, I could go down a big rabbit hole with all of that, and I won't do. I haven't got lots of promises I can make you. I'm not a politician. I'm a woman who's worked here in Devon for 30 years. I moved here with my eldest daughter 31 years ago, in fact. I've worked in the community, run 2 retail businesses for the last 20 years. And before that, worked in social services and volunteering in various committees for Preschool Learning Alliance and a kindergarten in Exeter. Helped set up the farmers market in Ottery St Mary, stood up against Tesco's and McCarthy and Stone to get the hotel in Seaton instead of another retirement block that was trying to go in under the radar. But anyway, it's not what I've achieved, it's what I would do for you. As an independent voice, I don't have to answer to anybody other than to you guys. And in government, that's all I would want to do. I've given my life in service pretty much, and I would like to carry on and serve to the best of my ability for all of you, as much as I could possibly do as an independent in. If we get independence in, you've got a voice in government, a true voice in government, not one that's actually ruled by the massive war complex and everywhere else that has an influence over our MPs. Anyway, thank you.
First of all, can everybody hear me? Okay? Good. First of all, I'd like to say as well how lovely it is to be able to address people directly, face to face. No screens involved, no electronics, no masks. Just seeing people face to face is so wonderful these days. That's really great. And a big thank you to the organisers for arranging this venue. Now, I'm very mindful that I am in a church, so I hope that you are not going to be shocked by the language I use. I represent, I'm an official candidate for the Party of Women, very recently formed. I think we were registered on the 8th of February this year. So we're a very young party, and it's been a very snap election, so we're all jumping through lots of hoops. But we were formed because we are so worried, so distressed by the damage that is being done to our society. So we don't have a manifesto either, because we're not in the business of making promises that can't be kept. Is that better? Promises that can't be kept. The message that I have for people today is that we need to take action to stop the rot. And the core beliefs that we have as a party are, and you might be gasping in a minute, no woman has a penis, no man has a vagina, there is no such thing as non-binary, and transitioning children is the most profound abuse. This ideology, this whatever it is, has crept into all our areas of life. And although we are the party of women, we're fighting for everybody, because everybody is affected by this. We can start off with young children in schools. They're being presented with a smorgasbord of sexual identities that they can choose. But ordinary men and women, we know that a man cannot become a woman cannot become a man. So how confusing is it for our young children to think that they can decide what they want to be? And I think there's a whole spectrum of things that, I don't know if it's huggies or furries or all kinds of ridiculous things, which is so damaging for their psychologies. They've been damaged enough with having the lockdowns, which mean that a lot of their social development was arrested, their language development, that kind of thing. And then to pile this on them as well, it's really no wonder that we have such an explosion of mental health illness in this country to deal with. So, later on, young adults, we all know, or young adolescents, I should say, we all know that it's a very difficult time for everybody to go through. There's lots of confusing things happening. There's also the recent history that we've lived through. They're being siphoned off into counselling services where they're being pressured or misled or persuaded that the answer to their problems is to go through some kind of transitioning. So I'm sure you've all heard about the puberty blockers debate. They're being given very strong drugs that I think are often used for men with prostate cancer and things like that. At a younger age, their sexual development is arrested. They're damaged for life. Many of them become infertile. They can never father a child. They can never give birth. Later on, it changes to physical mutilation. There are surgeons, I can't believe it, in this country who are willing to slice off healthy breasts from young women so that they can never breastfeed their young. There are surgeons who are willing to cut off other bits of male bodies so that people are being left with damaged bodies, unable to have healthy, intimate relationships with anyone throughout their lives. Many detransitioners, as they're called, realise how dangerous this is, but it's too late. I think when we have more of these young people realising what they have done, there is going to be such an uproar. Sorry? 5 seconds, okay. I have hardly said anything. We're all affected by this. People in nursing homes, in residential homes, we want to have same-sex care. We want to be able to go into women's toilets and not have men in dresses endangering us. In the NHS, we don't want to be denied surgery because we dare to question the rainbow flags everywhere. The police want to spend their time, instead of dealing with rape victims. Okay, I will conclude. So the thing that we need to do is to stand up, because we know in our hearts that this is not right and it has to be stopped. Thank you.
I see before me this evening a great deal of experience. And by that I mean I'm looking around at people who have been employers. You in this room have been employers whether you knew that or not, because you have employed members of Parliament in the past. As a member of Parliament, personally for the constituency that includes Honiton, I was employed by the people who voted for me. And I suggest that as voters here in Sidmouth this evening, you will be the employer for your next MP. In my 25 years of employing other people, I've always asked the question, what candidate has the most relevant experience for the job? And this evening, I suggest very humbly that I am that candidate. Politics is career number 3 for me. I started off with a little over a decade in the army. I then spent a decade in universities. And so far, this politician career of mine, I know politician is quite a dirty word, but this politician career of mine has lasted for 2 years, and I'm seeking to extend this career a little further by representing you. What I learned from my first career is that I learned about the importance of the public service ethos. I wanted from a very early age to be a public servant, and I really believe that despite some in political life having lost their way recently, there is still hope for public service in public life. Sidmouth is part of a new Honiton and Sidmouth constituency. It's going to be made up of 70% of the constituency that I've had the privilege of representing for the last 2 years, and 30% of the former East Devon constituency that Simon inherited from Hugo Swire. And quite aside from what a beautiful area this is, and quite aside from what an incredible town Sidmouth is, I'm just struck by what a rich social fabric there is in this town. In the last 6 months, where I've increasingly been coming here of a Saturday or a Sunday, I've noticed that there are so many people here who want to get stuck in and improve this community, and I want to help with that too. I would like to achieve, as your MP for Sidmouth, improved health services. That for me would be priority number 1. I'd want to see a cleaner environment, and this for me is massively important, but it's also massively important to the Liberal Democrats too. And I want to see a healthy business environment. I want to see a government that is providing us with economic stability that we've not had over the last 2 years. Because rather what we've had is some shenanigans, shall we say, in Westminster. This election is your opportunity to return a verdict on what we've seen from this Conservative government in the last 2 years. The lack of leadership by example from Boris Johnson, the ideological experiments of Liz Truss, and most recently, the polite managerialism of Rishi Sunak, all while the Conservative Party is collapsing into a tired, irritable civil war that will be played out in the next Parliament. And most of all, what I want to bring to this role is honesty and integrity, because what we've seen from some MPs in the Parliament that is now over is a real lack of integrity and honesty and owning up for the mistakes of their team. The sort of thing that we've seen just in recent days around people gambling on the date of the election for their own personal benefit. I can assure you, having sat in the House of Commons, that there are many decent MPs who absolutely are motivated by public service, but there are a few who give the rest of us a bad name, and those few are out sometimes for their own benefit, and that needs to stop. My final point is, in this particular constituency of Honiton and Sidmouth, this is going to be a contest between the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats. So I urge you to vote not against your least favourite party at this election, but for a positive vision of Britain in the 21st century. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbours. It has been the honour of my life to be your MP since 2019. Sidmouth is my home, and I'm the only candidate that lives here. I have always done my best for the Sid Valley. After I led a debate in Parliament about South West Water's appalling performance, they announced up to £30 million worth of investment to improve water quality. When Lloyds Bank announced they were closing, the last bank in town, I worked hard to make sure our banking hub opened before Lloyd's closed and had the banks in it that we needed and we've lost in recent years. When bus services between Sidford, Sidbury and Honiton were cut, I worked with residents to get Stagecoach to reinstate evening services, with some services now returned, to the great relief of people who go to the Red Line in Sidbury. Working with Sidmouth Primary School, I put pressure on the Department for Education to secure the funding needed to work up plans to rebuild the Manstone Avenue site, something that's taken far too long. There's more I could say, but I'll be honest with you. The best bit of the job is helping people. And there's a heck of a lot of problems to sort. Whether it's problems with council housing, the standard of it, driving licence delays, we've all experienced those. I'm sure some people in this room have emailed me about them. During COVID, I was there with you in this town, helping with discretionary grants and businesses that didn't know what to do next. Or it's standing up for Sidmouth when our council decided to double the parking charges, harming our local businesses and tourism, and disgracefully tried to rewild our cemetery. All those things, I've been on your side. We live in the best part of Devon, but there is so much more to do, and I want to get back to work. I want to bring more healthcare closer to home, like we've done in Ottery St Mary. When I was first elected, half that hospital was empty. It's now almost full of services. I'll always fight to protect our community hospitals. You have my word. We have more police in our force than ever before, but we need to see them more often in our towns and villages, and we need to reopen police stations to the public, like we've done in Honiton. With my plan for our part of Devon, we can make our towns and villages even better places to live. I've been out on doorsteps in the Sid Valley to speak to people about issues that matter to them, including potholes. I am not taking any vote for granted. Thank you for coming this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very new to this, so I'll probably make this very brief. I've been an engineer all my life, and I've been a Conservative voter. I've watched the government over the last, particularly since 2019, and have been so disappointed the way it's gone. I decided to stand for reform. You can find what we stand for on the reforms we're for. I'm not going to bore you with all their details. I'm not going to be able to compete with these other very good speeches. They've done very well. I agree with a lot of the points that have been made. What I will be able to deliver is really much down to what money is available, given the country's dire state of finances at the moment, which is one of the reasons that Reform are tackling that issue. I can't really say anything else at this point in time because I'm very new to this, and literally this was sprung on me a few weeks ago. So I'm going to leave it there and let you look at their website and you can make your own minds up.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all the candidates for those opening statements. So we're now going to turn to the questions. And as I said earlier, these questions are thematic questions based on the large number of questions that we have received during the course of the last few days. So the first question, which I'll address, is after the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, and the highest level of taxation in living memory, in your opinion, what action should now be taken to restore the economy? And I'll ask Jake Bonetta to start the answers.
Thank you. Obviously, over the last 4 or 5 years, the UK has faced some pretty severe challenges. As the question mentions, obviously we've gone through a pretty traumatic pandemic. Every single person in this room will remember not being able to leave their homes for longer than an hour to exercise their dog. I think I might have snuck over by a minute or two, 1 or 2 times when I walked my dog in COVID. And also with the war in Ukraine, which has really severely affected grain imports across Europe and the rest of the world. and also the cost of living crisis. But it's really important to mention with all of this that the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom, and Liz Truss has even mentioned this and agreed to this. She's apologised for it back in 2022, the day before she resigned. It's the Conservatives that have made this worse for the country. Yes, the rest of the world is facing a cost of living crisis, but we're facing one of the worst cost of living crises in Europe. And there are political decisions that have been made to cause that. I mean, we saw the kamikaze budget that Liz Truss put on us back in 2022, which caused unfunded spending and a run on the market. We've seen the decimation of our public services over the last 14 years. What we need is change. And by change, I mean, let's return to some economic stability for once. Let's have a long-term plan in government to unlock investment in our country, attract businesses, small and medium enterprises back to investing in the United Kingdom. Let's have a chancellor, in Rachel Reeves, who will be very strict on the fiscal rules that she sets for any government. And let's bring about some long-term strategy into our short-term politics. It's all well and good making unfunded promises and promising tax cuts and whatnot, but we cannot play hard and fast with the public purse. That is not right. Labour will deliver economic stability and ensure there is no repeat of the disasters that we've seen over the last couple of years. And we will introduce a charter through Parliament. We will set an act in law to make sure that we have the OBR enforcing what the government is doing and give more independence to those sorts of structures. It's all well and good making promises, and everything Labour is coming out with is fully funded. I've got a full list. If anyone wants to be bored by the full list of how we'd fund our different policies, then you're more than welcome to come and speak to me afterwards. But at the end of the day, what this country needs in our time of difficulty at the moment is some stability, and that's what Labour would provide.
Well, I'm not part of a party that could make any promises, so it's quite a difficult one, really, in lots of ways. But we've seen an awful lot of promise. I'm thinking sort of back over the last 40 years, really, when we started privatising all of the services that we had in this country. We privatised the post office, we privatised the BT, we privatised all of the electric, and we've privatised all the gas, and we've privatised all of the water. And all of these corporations are making massive millions of pounds of profits, billions of pounds of profits on all of us. We were told in the beginning, and I believe it was Margaret Thatcher who told us on the pretence that it was because it would make them more efficient, and so therefore then would be better for our pockets, so we'd have cheaper all of these things. None of that has been proven right to us at all, but we're even down to all of our bins have been privatised, all of our recycling is privatised. All of those profits could actually be funding all of us, and could still have been funding all of us if it wasn't all sold off to the highest bidder. I think there's many, many, many ways that we could be reducing the level of money flowing out of our pockets. I also think the government squanders a massive amount on the NHS, and it gets misappropriated to places that it shouldn't be. You know, we're paying how many millions and millions, in fact billions, probably into paying for wars that are none of our business. Not that I think that we should be allowing the stuff that's going on in the world to be going on, but I think this is all a whole lot of nonsense, really, and a lot of talk, and I'm not sure that we're going to see any action if we stay with party politics, in all fairness. I can't give you an answer to this because I'm not in Parliament, I'm not in government, I'm not making the budgets. The civil service run all of this anyway, so they can make all the promises they want to. There's probably lots of ways and means.
Thanks, Vanessa. So, Hazel.
Well, in answer to that very involved question, I can simply say that I haven't got a clue how it can be resolved. I've been of voting age for well over 40 years now, and in all that time, politicians have made promise after promise after promise, we still have the same problems, and in fact we have more problems, and they're often worse. So I wonder whether even it's MPs who are running the shops in this thing, because why can't it be resolved? It surely is not beyond the wit of man for a civilised country like ours with good economy to have a decent healthcare service, to have a decent education system, all the other things, no potholes in the roads. Why is it so difficult? What is really going on? That, I think, is what we need to ask. And if I were elected, I would certainly be asking questions, and I would be asking the difficult questions. So that's all I can say at this stage, so thank you.
When I've been talking to people who are supporters of the Conservative Party in recent months, I've heard a certain amount of forgiveness along the lines of, but they've had it tough. But we've had these external shocks. There's been the pandemic, there's been the Ukraine war, there has been cost of living crisis. The mark of a real leader is how you deal with these situations. And if we take, for example, the pandemic, we would expect our Prime Minister to share the same privations that he expected us to undergo. If we think about the effect of the war in Ukraine, this is not about spending more, but this is about spending differently. We know that Liz Truss announced £39.3 billion to help everybody heat their homes in the winter of 2022. But what if that £40 billion has been spent on insulating people's homes like we were doing during the coalition government? This is partly about... you talked about language earlier, Hazel, and we have heard some biological language from you. I'm going to quote some David Cameron language at you. Cut the green crap. We remember that's what the Conservatives did in government, and we will make sure as Liberal Democrats that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. It's a great question. We must do right by the people of Ukraine, and actually the East Devon district had the most Homes for Ukraine applications and successful applications in all of Devon, and I was pleased to help with some of those applications because it was fiendishly complicated, especially at first. When it comes to the cost of living, I know it's been really tough. Energy bills have gone up. It's been incredibly difficult for a lot of people. So we've delivered on our promise to halve inflation and gone there even further now, down to 2%. We're cutting national insurance. And the reason we're doing that is because I believe, and Conservatives believe, you know how to spend your money better than the government do. Now, we also continue to support households with a cost of living package which is worth, on average, £3,700 per person. Because this government recognises it's been tough for an awful lot of people. The national living wage, something that's really helped so many people in our part of the world, because we've always had a low wage economy in the southwest. As a Devonian myself, I can testify to that. We've done a lot to help people through a very, very difficult time. Has it been perfect? No, absolutely not. But would I change anything? I don't think we could do much more to assist people through some of the most difficult times our nation has been through. And we don't like talking about COVID, but it has had an impact on all of our public services. I know it's a really difficult time, and I was here in Sidmouth throughout. I know people really struggled. The impact of that is still being felt in our health service and local services. But we must do what we can to support them, and I think we are.
So with the reform, cutting waste in government...
Sorry, we're not taking comments from the floor, thank you. So, please, we're not taking comments from the floor. So,
Where was I?
Again, I think.
Oh, yeah. So, green taxes, to me, this net zero, I'm all for going green, but not at any cost. They've been one of the biggest transfers of wealth we've seen in living memory. So reform are going to have savings on immigration, an employer's immigration tax. So if you employ a foreign national, you pay more tax, which seems fair enough to me. Energy savings, scrap the green net zero. What else are we going to do here? So we've got government quangos, another huge waste of money. All these things need looking at, and again, on the Reforms website you'll see a full list of what we intend to do to reduce expenditure, to put money back in people's pockets.
All right, thank you. OK, we move on to the second question. A large part of the constituency is given over to agriculture. What measures do you believe should be put in place to ensure that farmers are supported and food security for the country as a whole is given the priority it deserves? Vanessa. Thank you.
I've actually worked a lot with farming throughout my adult life. I lived on a dairy farm in Wiltshire for 8 years. Quite a long time ago now. I was considerably younger, but helping out in the general duties on the farm of, the roles that they brought people in to pick wild oats and to just generally help with fencing and baling and all of the other activities. But in Devon itself, I started up my original health food business because I wanted to support local producers and I wanted to start providing outlets for local producers. I think it was even in the Midweek Herald saying about this. We had quite a big movement to get local food production up together and much more supported in Devon. But then, on the back of all of that also, we set up the farmers' market in Ottery St Mary. There was a load of farmers' markets set up all over, so Honiton, Ottery, I think Cullompton, and it was in fact a government initiative at the time to do so. So I was on the committee to set that up. But also locally here, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we initiated an online farmers' market, which enabled local producers to come together to get orders put out, and we were delivering to local and vulnerable people in the area with just local produce. It's actually, there's an awful lot available, but most of us tend to go to supermarkets. I'm not one of those. I buy in my local shops and I buy from this online supermarket and support our local producers. There is a huge amount of local produce that an awful lot of people don't really know about. There is a big initiative, and I can see we've even got some producers in the audience that are local producers. Do you know where you can access? How many people actually are going into our local butchers and buying your meat from your local producers? How many are going to our greengrocers and getting your vegetables from your local greengrocers? It is here, and actually we have a massive, massive power in our own hands, in our pockets, to go and support our local producers. And the more you support them, the more they'll produce for you. At the moment, most farmers are told what they have to produce on their farms, what they have to grow, what their requirements are of them, and that's what they get the funding for, and that's all they get paid for. If they don't want to do that, they have to do it off their own back and take their own initiatives, and they don't have the support from the government to do so. So there's a massive amount of changing for farmers to come together and say, what do you want from the government? What do you want the government to provide for you? What do you want them to do? They are your public servants. They are your employees. And they should be working for you and helping you get back on your feet.
Thank you.
So I would say again that food security is very important, but why on earth hasn't it been dealt with before? It's not a new problem. Why hasn't this been looked at? I think it's something that we all need to worry about, because we can remember when the supermarket shelves were empty. We don't know how far away that is going to be again. Dig up your gardens and plant vegetables.
Well, the UK does have a problem of food security. If we were to go back 30 years, the UK was 74% food secure, meaning we were producing 74% of all our food on these islands. That figure is now at 61%. That proportion is at 61%. So our food security is declining massively. And sometimes there is a false conflict set up here between those people who want to distinguish between environmental goods and food security. This is a false distinction. We need nature-friendly farming for farming to be sustainable into the long term and make us food secure over the decades to come. And that's why the Liberal Democrats would invest an additional £1 billion in the Environmental Land Management Scheme. It would further incentivise farmers to deliver public goods and help us to move over to a much more sustainable, nature-friendly form of farming. Final point, what we've seen under Boris Johnson in particular was a rush to sign trade deals with any country that would have us. And therefore we had the Australia and New Zealand trade deal that was struck to the detriment of British farmers. UK farmers have lost out by £93 million directly as a consequence of that rushed, botched trade deal.
So clearly our food security really matters, and there is work to do to improve it. I'm clear, having met with farmers and held regular quarterly farmers' forums, that they want to produce food, not fill out endless forms. Now, as a result of Brexit, we've moved away from the EU's bureaucratic land-based system, which meant that actually larger farms, big landowners, got more money just because they had more land, as opposed to doing good for nature alongside growing food. This has been good progress. It hasn't been perfect. But what we need to do is focus on food resilience. That's the key. Richard and I both signed a letter to put forth supermarkets to put a Buy British button on their websites. We need all supermarkets to sign up to that so that when you're shopping online, you know exactly what you're buying and where it's coming from, because you need to be informed about your choice. And sometimes packaging is not as clear as it should be. Now, the Conservatives will put more money into the agriculture budget at the same amount, actually, as the Liberal Democrats. But the other thing we need to do is reform the groceries supply code of practice. That's the way that supermarkets operate, because supermarkets aren't behaving fairly. We have seen so many times, and I've heard from so many farmers, they only get the price for their milk, their produce, at the farm gate when they come to collect it. And there's no negotiation. That cannot be right. We must reform the supply code of practice and make sure that supermarkets buy what they agree to buy, pay what they agree to pay, and pay on time. It's incredibly important. But farming is a key thing. I must confess, I'm not a farming. I don't come from a farming background. But in 2020, I backed an amendment to the agriculture bill to increase scrutiny on trade deals. That amendment was signed by the former MP for Tiverton and Honiton, Neil Parish. As a result of that, the NFU asked me to lead debates after Neil's departure in Parliament for farming, so I always have our farmers' backs.
Having come from quite a farming-based background, my grandfather farmed in West Sussex. We currently farm sheep at the moment, not many, but a handful. Farming is very important to me. I'm a big champion of looking after farmers to produce food for the people of this country. In our manifesto, we have an increase in the farming budget of £3 billion to scrap climate-related farm subsidies to produce food instead, to protect countryside sports, to prevent supermarket price fixing, to encourage people to buy British quality. So, again, this is all in our manifesto, which I could have written myself, actually. It's very good. Anyway, so that's...
Finally, Jake.
Thank you. I want to start off very quickly by just saying the following phrase. Food security is national security. Nothing more, nothing less. Without food security in the United Kingdom, as we have seen across Europe with the different problems that we've had over the last couple of years, our national security is at stake. We cannot afford to continue to lose out on our food security. We cannot continue the exchange between importing and exporting that's been happening. And we cannot continue the trade deals that have been signed for... I remember Boris Johnson very excited about the trade deal with Australia and how we were going to get loads of Tim Tam biscuits. But that has brought about a loss of £48 million from farming and fisheries in the UK. Labour's plans... we would set up a land use framework that supports sustainable farming across the UK, recognising the diversity of our farming markets. The West Country is... 40% of our West Country farms are smallholders, and most of our farms around here are pastoral, so handle livestock. So it's really important that we look at land use and how we can recognise the diversity that we have here as opposed to places like the east of England, which have massive arable farms, for example. It's also really important to look at the public sector, how we, as a government, want to treat the country and how we respect our own industry. And therefore, Labour has committed that at least 50% of public sector food should be bought from the local area. The economy of public sector food buying, of procurement in that sector, especially in the NHS and in prisons, is worth £1 billion every year. Putting that into local pockets is one quick way to get some money back into our local economy. It's really important also to look at other ways that we can improve our food security. I know many farmers across the UK have struggled post-2016, post-Brexit, with issues getting livestock across the border. So it's really important that we look to renegotiate the vet agreement that we have with the EU to help remove those barriers and make it easier to import and export livestock. I recognise there's a whole load more things I could go on about agriculture, and it's such an incredibly crucial topic for our region and indeed for our country, but I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move on then to a question around schools and education. Currently, schools are struggling with recruitment and infrastructure. What ideas do you have to support schools and increase teacher retention? Hazel.
Well, I talked a lot about what is going on in our schools today, so I think you'll be unsurprised to hear that I think we should get rid of all of the transgender ideology, which takes up so much time, and I'm sure is the reason why so many teachers are leaving the profession in droves, because they know it is not right what is being done to children. So I think that would be a very good beginning. I think we also have to look at the training that is primarily responsible for the things that are being taught, the very negative things, and we have to think about where this is coming from, because I don't think it is coming necessarily from the MPs that have been in power over the last 20 years, but it has certainly come from somewhere, and we need to know why it is being pushed in schools, who is benefiting from it. Ordinary people know that it's not right. I think we should try and stop it. Thank you.
Well, Liberal Democrats were really very proud of our pupil premium that was introduced over a decade ago, which put additional funding into those schools that had, and it was per pupil, for those schools that had children who were less fortunate or came from less privileged backgrounds. And this is something that we absolutely want to reinforce. This pupil premium has been a great success, and we want to see that absolutely pursued in the next Parliament. The other point I want to make is about mental health. Children have sacrificed a lot for us during the pandemic, and some of them have come out of lockdown with mental health where they're perhaps not as resilient as a generation that went before them. And I think we need to recognise that there are great things we can do by acting preventatively around children's mental health, so we're not stacking up problems for the future. 1/2 a point, we also need to invest in special educational needs, because by doing so, we can also support the majority for whom they're currently distracted or finding it difficult to learn amidst. Thank you.
Education matters. I've been visiting an awful lot of schools in my time as your Member of Parliament, and I've seen some of the challenges that schools are facing, including in funding. One of the things I've tried to champion and tried to make clear in government is the salaries for teaching assistants are far too low. They are not something that people can afford to do as an average salary. Equally, we have special needs, special schools in our part of Devon, in Budley, just outside Bicton. And for example, the salary for a teaching assistant is the same in a special school as it is a normal school that, doesn't provide special needs education. That can't be right. That must change. In 2010, only 68% of schools in this country were rated good or outstanding. That is now 90%. We have done a good job for education, but there is much more to be done. Much more to be done. We must increase, and we have been doing, teacher starter salaries to make sure we can recruit and retain teachers, because teachers aren't just teaching. They're providing so much care for people and support for adults and children. It has been something of a learning curve for me. I dated a teacher for a couple of years, helped her put lessons plans together. Teachers work incredibly hard. They deserve a salary that can be one that you can live on, and that hasn't always been the case. It is getting better, though. But we have made progress, as I say, and I will always work with our schools, whether that's to get a new building, like for Tipton St John Primary or Sidmouth Primary, or it's to improve salaries, like I've been trying to do. I haven't always succeeded, but you know what? I'll always try.
So with education, we intend to increase the spending by approximately $5 billion. We're going to ban transgender ideology in schools. We're going to do tax relief of 20% on all independent education, unlike Labour, who want to increase VAT. It's a bonkers policy. What else are we going to do? Scrap interest on student loans, cut funding to universities that undermine free speech. Universities must provide 2-year undergraduate courses. So this is just a small part of what Reform intend to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lots to cover there, I think. So I'm quite happy I've gone further at the back here. I'm going to start with a swear word, if that's all right. So any teachers, cover your ears. When it comes to our education, it should be experts deciding the curriculum, not Michael Gove. And I apologise again. It's really important when we're looking at our kids' education that we have a sustainable future for everyone. We need an education system that sets young people up in this country for work, for life and for the future, not for exam results. And not to drone on in a sort of diatory existence that we're having at the moment. We have many problems that need to be addressed, and the education system can help with that. We've got a workforce crisis, so we need to start training our children in expert fields to help plug those gaps. We want to recruit, as a party, 6,500 new teachers across the country in experts in their field to at least start to fill a lot of the gaps in our schools. And I know this firsthand. I know I was extremely humbled and lucky to go to what was one of the best schools in the country, one of the best state schools in the country, Colleton. But even still, my PE teacher was also my maths teacher. Every school is struggling, and the 93% of state school funded education in the country is struggling. I know that private schools have been mentioned. I thought I'd cover that a bit, because it is really important to talk about the private school sector and how that works. And yes, I do think it is right that private schools should start paying their fair share in VAT and in business rates. At the end of the day, what we've got in the UK at the moment is a massively unequal education system. We need to start to repair that. That is the first step towards repairing that. I want to make it absolutely abundantly clear, and I know a lot of reports have been going around about the private school plans that Labour have. Labour has absolutely no intention of putting VAT on people under education, care and health plans in the UK. So that includes people attending the Deaf Academy, for example, or people that have special educational needs requirements. That is a no-go area for Labour. That is a red line. But it is really important that we start to think about having a more equal, more fair education system across the country. And to top it off, obviously talking about the fiscal responsibilities of any government, that VAT increase will fund the extra mental health support in schools. It will fund the extra 6,500 new teachers that we need. And it will help to allow our students across our schools to explore the diversity that they need to explore and to become themselves, not just robots. We need a system that works for all, that is equal for all, and that is what Labour would deliver.
I'd like to give our children back a childhood and stop all the pressure that adults or an adult expectations on children to be little adults before they've even had a chance to grow up. I was with the Preschool Learning Alliance, I don't know how many years ago now. I could go back 20 plus years ago. My eldest daughter she's 32, so 25 years ago I was working with Preschool Learning Alliance. And even then the government were implementing so many more pressures on just what they wanted preschool teachers to be inflicting on our small children, when they really should just be playing and expecting to be sitting down and doing too much when they're really not meant to. I mean, we label and box children off into ADHD or whatever, but our state system does not fit the children. We're expecting children to fit into a system that really doesn't benefit probably even 50% of them. They need to be playing, they need to have the pressure taken off them, and we need to really completely rethink what we're doing with education. It doesn't allow children to grow into the people that they're meant to be. They're meant to be someone, do something to be someone, and they're not allowed to just be who they are and grow and develop and just move into what area of life they want to develop into. They don't get a chance to develop and grow. They are forced into boxes to just be who we expect them to be. There's far too many expectations on kids, far too much pressure. Their mental health is in an appalling state. And there's big changes. I mean, we talk about finance, but it isn't about money. It's actually about the attitude we have towards our kids in the first place. They need a childhood. They need to actually have the chance to have a childhood before they can grow into healthy adults. Healthy childhood creates healthy adults. They are our foundation. They are what our future is going to be. They are the future of this country, and they need a massive investment in them. Financial, emotional, physical, everything needs investing in them first. If we don't have a good foundation, what future have any of us got, really?
So we move on to a question now about healthcare, and I think this is a subject on which we had certainly a large number of questions. Here in the Sid Valley, you can wait up to 4 weeks for a GP appointment. What would you do to improve our health service and make it fit for purpose? Richard.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, because it's not only the Sid Valley, though I appreciate it is really a struggle here. There's a national problem that we have of access to GP appointments. And so the Liberal Democrats are seeking to have an additional 8,000 GPs. And with that that additional 8,000 GPs, we reckon that we can have you able to access your GP within 7 days. Now, I should say this is the flagship policy from the Liberal Democrat Manifesto. And as such, we have identified £8 billion of taxes that will pay for it. And that breaks down such that we would like to see capital gains tax rise on the wealthiest 0.1% of transactions. And we also would like to see a tax on share buybacks. That £8 billion that we know can be levied will be directly put into a healthcare NHS rescue package, which is so desperately needed. Just if this is the health question, I also simply want to add that we are seeing in rural and coastal areas like this one the demise of our community health facilities. And I'm seeing this particularly in the area I represent with a proposal to sell off part of Seaton Hospital, which is something I have been fighting very hard to prevent. We absolutely need to maintain these community facilities. I can see in the audience your candidate from 2019, Claire Wright, who fought hard to try to retain the beds in all of the hospitals in this district, not only here in Sidmouth. And we absolutely are going to have to fight tooth and nail in the next Parliament to make sure that we don't lose any further community health facilities from this area.
We've heard the scaremongering before about our community hospitals, but the fact is, when I was elected in 2019, I went to go and speak to the NHS bosses in Devon, and I said, how many community hospital beds do we have in the constituency? And they told me. And I said, how many will we have at the next election? And they said, well, we don't know. I said, the answer is the same number of community hospital beds in Sidmouth and Exmouth. Our community hospital beds are really, really important in Sidmouth. They look after an awful lot of people, and I will always do everything I can to protect them. I gave an example earlier about Ottery St Mary Hospital. When I was first elected, I wandered around that hospital that was half empty. What a crime that was. It is now almost full of services. They've been moved from the RD&E to Ottery to benefit local people, because that hospital needs to be put to good use. When it comes to Seaton Hospital, it's absolutely key. That wing must not be sold off, demolished, or anything else. It needs to be returned to the community who helped buy it. Absolutely key. And that's something that I'll make a top priority if elected. My father almost died a couple of years ago, and he recovered in a community hospital. It's personal to me, but also what's really important is the future of our NHS. For the first time, we have an NHS long-term workforce plan, and that means we can plan for the future of our NHS. I want to pay tribute to our GP surgery in Sidmouth, because I think they do a fantastic job under extremely difficult circumstances. The new building is fantastic. They're about to open in Sidmouth Hospital. They've had a few problems with broadband, but it's almost done. And I think we ought to pay tribute to the people who work on our NHS, because they work incredibly hard and have kept us healthy and surviving through an incredibly difficult pandemic. We must remember as well that we've still got the only Nightingale hospital open in the country left. The Exeter Nightingale Hospital, which is a huge improvement on home base, has been bringing down waiting lists since it was opened. Any politician who sits here and tells you they can get hospital beds back in our community hospitals is lying to you. Because during the pandemic, 125 beds were put in our Nightingale Hospital. We could only find the staff 52. That's the reality. To turn that around takes time. We need to make sure we protect our local NHS services, and they are safe in my hands.
Well, thank you, Simon. I would agree with everything you said there, really. I'd like to add, though, from the reform point of view, we intend to increase the number of doctors and nurses, as already touched on. It takes time. Use independent healthcare where possible, to give tax relief on people using private healthcare, to encourage those who can afford it to use private healthcare. What else we got here? So we've got to cut unnecessary waste in management within the NHS. Really to make the NHS more efficient, a bit more like the French system, I've got first-hand experience of, which is excellent. So.
Okay.
This is quite a hot topic for me at the moment. Some of you may know, and I know Richard knows, because we did an interview together, what, was it last week? Must have been last week. But I have just come out of major abdominal surgery. This is my first public engagement since that 3 weeks ago. And in the time that I was in hospital, in Lyme Ward down at the RD&E, I had a lot of time to think and speak to people that work in our NHS, the absolute stars that keep our NHS afloat. And every single nurse that I spoke to talked about how they felt forgotten by this current government. It's all well and good throwing a load of money at an issue. I know that's been mentioned before. But if it doesn't get resolved, and if the government isn't on your side, then what's the point? I was extremely lucky with the care that I got, and I'm perfectly on the way to the recovery, but loads of people in my position are not so lucky. NHS waiting times at the moment are at 7.5 million, which is, and I know Rishi Sunak struggles with maths, clearly higher than when he started as Prime Minister. And we need to have a systematic reform and relook at the way in which our NHS is treated by government. We need to reduce those waiting lists, and Labour will put money aside for 40,000 new appointments every single week, because this is a national emergency. We need to look at reforming the system to allow for appointments on weekends and on in the evenings. And don't worry, we will pay staff extra out-of-hours money for this, and that will be paid by closing the non-dom loopholes that the Tories have allowed to continue through government. We also want to double the scanning capacity at our hospitals, which would cost £171 million, again, through closing those same loopholes. And with dentistry, I mean, personally, I don't have an NHS dentist. I'm sure many people in this room are in the same position. My NHS dentist surgery a few years ago turned around and said, right, you don't have a dentist anymore. We need to create 700,000 new appointments in our dentistry service every year through a dentistry rescue plan, and also support our children through that service as well. That is really important. I think we also have lacked something quite important when it comes to our NHS over the last couple of years, and that's the family doctor. We want to bring back the family doctor. Under Labour's plans, we will. And we also want to work with NHS leaders to bring about neighbourhood health centres. And if I'm elected, I will absolutely be focusing on bringing those trials to Devon and to Honiton and Sidmouth. It's really interesting that it's been mentioned about working with NHS Devon and the bosses and management in the local NHS service. But the boss for NHS Devon, Sarah Wollaston, the former Conservative MP for Totnes, has just stepped down as the boss for NHS Devon, because she could not balance the books with the money that the government has been giving her. When I talk about the treatment of the NHS and how the current Conservative government has been leaving them out to dry, I mean it. We need a serious look at how we treat our healthcare staff, how we treat people on waiting lists, and how we can start to recover the absolute crisis in our healthcare service from top to bottom. And I'll leave that there because I go on way too much.
I just wonder, you are all aware that our NHS is not our NHS anymore. It is pretty much being completely privatised. So it does mean the bottom line is they do need to make massive profits on our health or our sickness, in fact. So I think there's a massive amount of change that just needs to happen across the board. The reason we have massive waiting lists is because the health of our country, the general health of our population, is not good. And we need to address the health of the population rather than the sickness of the population. The NHS the staff are brilliant. I can't fault them. I broke a wrist 2 years ago. I then had the misfortune of breaking my ankle last year. So they were amazing, massive support. I'm a naturopath and a herbalist, so I did actually do all the internal healing myself with herbs and natural medicine. They did all the casting and x-rays. I didn't have any operations. Everything was in alignment, and they were perfect. I couldn't fault any of the staff. A friend of mine is here in Sidmouth Hospital. But I also, you're saying about the Seaton and Ottery, and the fact we bought these hospitals, and the fact that they could even think that they can sell Seaton Hospital and not have it reopened as a hospital, I think is in fact criminal, because we own it and we really should be having that under our name for us. So much of our health care, I can't really call it health care, but our appointments are made and centralised to Exeter. Now that uses a huge amount of travelling backwards and forwards, and surely it would be more environmentally effective for a consultant to come out to the small hospital, local hospitals, and have surgeries in local hospitals. I had to go and have, with a broken ankle and a broken leg, get from Ottery to Exeter and get myself back and forth for all of my appointments. There was no possibility of having an appointment in Ottery Hospital or anywhere else local, more local than Exeter. So you can imagine with a broken ankle and no other form of transport, it's not very easy to get there. So I think there's a lot to be desired to bring it back out to a lot of appointments back out to the local hospitals. Because centralising to it's a huge area to cover, one huge hospital. It's not really any wonder the waiting lists are so massive because of it. Okay.
So the NHS is another one of those prime areas where women are being really damaged by the transgender ideology. Our language is being taken away from us. Women are now being referred to as birthing persons, chest feeders, cervix havers, menstruators. It's a nonsense. And yet all these accommodations are being made for men who claim to be women, for the transgender ideology. If we didn't waste so much money on rewriting all the pamphlets to include them, if we didn't waste all the money on the surgeries to mutilate people who want to try to change sex, then I'm sure the NHS would be in a much better position. It needs to go back to being a service that provides care for everybody, whereas now, if women do dare to speak up against it, they're having surgeries and care denied to them because they dare to question it. Do we really have any concept of free speech in this country? It's time to stop it. Thank you.
Okay, could I just ask the candidates if we could have some concise answers going forward, because we're going to run out of time, I think, if we're not careful. So the next question is around water quality, which of course is a key local issue affecting local residents and the tourism industry. What action would you take to ensure that water quality is at an acceptable standard? Simon.
Great question, and a really important one. We've been paying South West water bills for decades, and we have not had a fair return for our investment. That's why I led a debate in Parliament 2 times, actually, on South West Water's poor performance. I have said they are guilty of environmental vandalism, and I stand by that statement. I've also said they're a disgrace. We pay the highest sewerage bills in the country. How ironic is that? So, rather than just sound bites and saying whatever they want to do to deal with it, I've been getting on with the job. After my debate, South West Water announced up to £30 million to improve our sewage treatment plant and sewage system here in Sidmouth, under the ham. Now, it hasn't happened yet, because you know what? The folk festival has to happen first. And digging up around the folk festival might not be a good idea for tourism. But we must improve our water quality. The reason we know the scale of the problem is because this Conservative government has made water companies put in the monitoring to reveal the scale of the issue. That's why we know there's a problem. Sewage has been going into our waters for decades, up until I think it was 2001, when sewage treatment plant at Sidford was built, it was going in raw. So investments have been made, more investments are needed. A couple of months ago, I met with South West Water at Kennaway House, and they told me I should be grateful for what they were doing for our area. How dare they? It's a disgrace how they've behaved over the last couple of years, and as an MP, if I'm re-elected, I'll continue to hold them to account. We cannot stop sewage outfalls overnight. We must have a costed plan that does not hit your bills. That's what we've legislated for, the monitoring so we know the scale of the problem, and forcing water companies to act. There is no point abolishing Ofwat and replacing it with something else that will do the same thing. Let's bolster Ofwat's responsibility and make sure the EA can investigate like they did in Exmouth in January. Multi-million-pound fines are heading South West Water's way, and that's great.
I don't actually have any specific policy from reform on this one, but I would pretty much back up what Simon says, that the water companies need to pull their socks up or get fined.
Thank you, James.
I'm going to try and keep this very short and concise because I realise so far my answers have been blitheringly boring and long. So I do have a quick bullet point list, I would like to say. I'll start off by saying that I'm a kayaker. I love kayaking along the coast here. I spend a lot of my time doing that. And I don't want myself, my friends, my family, nor my future kids, if I'm lucky to have them, to swim in poo like they are at the moment. There's a couple of things that Labour would do. We need powers to block bonuses for water companies until they've cleaned up their act. We need severe and automatic fines on our water companies when extra spillages do happen. We need the ability to bring about criminal charges against these water bosses for breaking legislation. And we need to end the self-monitoring of water companies. South West Water is self-monitoring themselves at the moment with their sewage output. And that's an absolute disgrace. And the money that the Conservative government has put in is all well and good, doesn't touch the sides, but also is helping to renew that same problem. We need to end that. We need to make sure that we beef up the Environment Agency, beef up Ofwat, make sure that we are making the records ourselves with independent monitoring to clean up the act of the water companies. It's as simple as that. There are so many issues with the system that we've got at the moment. We've got a Victorian-era sewage system that clearly needs some further investment. I'm sure Labour will come out with more plans going forward. But I can guarantee to you, if I'm elected as your MP, this will be at the top of my agenda. Let's clean up the act of our local water company.
Well, let's face it, water's the elixir of life, isn't it? We're all made of water, pretty much. Was it 95% of our bodies is water. The only not-for-profit water company in the UK is in Wales. Otherwise, everyone else is charging us high prices for our water and taking a massive profit for it. They should all be not-for-profit. Why are they profit-making companies? They all have massive wages. Why are they not having... We need to just make all water companies not-for-profit. They wouldn't be private any longer because that's all their interest is for profit. They should have been putting back into their infrastructure and there should have been laws put into place immediately they were privatised, that they would not be able to take huge profits. The infrastructure needed really sorting out because it is antiquated, most of it. And certainly not up to date. I know people who work in water testing in South West Water, and said it is just that the problem is it's always been here. It has always been here, but we've now got bigger populations, and still nothing has been done to bigger populations. And also think about how much more money they've made on those bigger populations without actually putting investment into any of the infrastructure. And so therefore, then we've got the problems we have now. It's just getting bigger, and it will just get bigger and bigger. So, yeah, not-for-profit is my idea.
So it really feels like we've been sold down the river. It's the same old problems Everybody's promising solutions, but it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? It's not as simple as introducing legislation. We need to have a complete reform of our political system. It's broken.
I know people are tired of parties having a pop at other parties, but in this particular subject, I think it's fair and reasonable that I should be able to have a bit of a pop at the government of the day. Because to me, criticising water companies when actually you're responsible for regulating water companies... That's a little bit like calling the fire brigade locally while allowing arsonists to play with matches nationally. And I'm sorry, but the government cannot stand aside on this one. We need proper regulation. We had in 2016 a Secretary of State for the Environment in Liz Truss who cut £235 million from the Environment Agency budget as part of an ideological project, and now what we see instead is chief executives like Susan Davey of South West Water taking remuneration packages of millions, including £300,000 additional pounds of your money last week. We need to reform this industry. The Liberal Democrats would turn these companies into public benefit companies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So, sort of a linked question. Scientific consensus agrees that planet temperatures will reach 2.5 degrees above pre-industrialised levels by 2050. What leadership will you provide to combat climate change in East Devon and more broadly the country? And we'll start with Jake on that one, please.
Thank you. I sit before you here today as the youngest person on this stage, and I would like to think that I would be forming part of the future that we need to deliver to young people across our country. And I say that with all intents and purposes, but at the same time, the planet is here for everyone. And we have an emergency with our climate that needs to be addressed now. We do not have time to stand around and wait about for the world to get warmer, for oil and gas companies to get richer, and for working people to get poorer. So Labour, if we're elected, we will spend a lot of time and a lot of effort in creating GB Energy. I'm sure you've heard loads about it. Keir Starmer doesn't stop talking about it. A publicly owned energy company, much like France has and other countries have, that can start to deliver the green energy that we need to be creating across the United Kingdom, which would be have an initial investment of £8.3 billion, fully funded through the fiscal lock. Which will also serve as a wealth creator for this country. Not only will it create 650,000 jobs across the United Kingdom, it will also allow us to start a national wealth fund investing in green technologies and green resources across the UK and across the world to make sure that not only the UK is looking after itself, but actually we're one of the leaders in the world on combating climate change. This is not something that we can dither and delay on. This is something that is affecting us already and will continue to affect us. There's loads of things that we need to do as well around our natural ecology. Labour will set up 9 national river walks across the UK, including one in the southwest, and also 3 massive national forests. We will also start a programme, a government-led programme of tree planting across the whole country. And also we will work to protect the existing green belt, but we also need to look at the brown prioritising housing construction on brownfield sites to help create a future that is fit for all, bring energy costs down for everyone, and make the country not only more affordable, but actually able to exist into the future. That's how serious the problem is going forward. It's existential, and Labour will be absolutely determined to make sure that the UK plays its part locally, nationally and internationally on its commitments.
When I was a young woman, I was quite closely connected with the Centre for Alternative Technology, and that's back in the early 80s. Now, they've been talking about this that's quite a lot of years, 40 years now, and I haven't seen any government really take a great deal of action, no matter whether it be Labour or Conservative, or Liberal Democrats and Labour Conservative mix. I don't think they've actually got a financial vested interest in doing it. Most of the carbons that are produced in this throughout the entire world are through massive corporation and industry. It isn't the likes of us who are making the biggest contribution to it. Huge corporations are the biggest polluters. I'm really not convinced about the scam of electric cars either, because of the amount of impact that is having on the world all over, with the mining and the slavery that's involved in the production of the batteries and everything else that goes with it. There are solutions, and I think as long as we've got the financial vested interest in governments and massive corporations together, we're not going to see a solution. A real solution is going to have to start with all of us and through our own independence. I've probably got one of the lowest carbon footprints in this entire room. We've all got to take the action.
Well, I'd absolutely support a lot of what Vanessa has said, but I would just question this scientific consensus about climate change. Are we talking about a human-engendered climate change, or are we talking about the climate change that, frankly, has been happening since the Big Bang, or whatever the beginning was? I think a lot of this talk about net zero and all the other measures to deal with this problem are just another scam to take money away from us.
Hazel, please, in your next answer, could you go back to talking about trans issues? Anthropogenic climate change is real, it's happening, it's here with us today. The Liberal Democrats want to see the UK cutting emissions such that we are at net zero by 2045. We want to see a proper windfall tax on oil and gas companies so that we close those investment loopholes that the Conservatives have put into their fake windfall tax during this last Parliament. It is an absolute disgrace that we have seen this Conservative government rowing back on the UK's climate commitments in recent years. Just at a time when we need international cooperation, and just at a time when we're seeing all other countries raising their sights and raising their ambitions, we see the UK going in the wrong direction under this Tory government. Finally, if you are about to hear some commitments on this score from Simon, I would just urge you, please, to look at both of our voting records on everything to do with climate and the climate emergency. Thank you.
Can I just say that I don't agree with Hazel, but I don't agree with shutting it down either. Respect matters, and I would have thought the military would have taught you that, Richard. So, under the Conservatives, spearheading more homegrown power through more offshore wind has been an absolute priority. Nuclear power and hydrogen is incredibly important. We need to be more self-reliant and also making sure that we halt biodiversity loss. We can see an example of that with the Lower Otter Restoration Project just up the road in Budleigh-Salterton. We must look where we can to put solar panels on new builds. It's common sense, but we must also make sure alongside doing that, the cost is not passed on to particularly new buyers into the market, because you know what? Getting on the housing market is way too expensive. We've got an awful lot to do, but we have set a credible path to net zero. There is nothing wrong with delaying the ending of sale of diesel cars till 2035. It's the same as Germany. It's the same as France. We can do it, and it won't hit our pockets either. On this journey, we must take people with us. Equally, locally, we know the importance of the Sidmouth Beach Management Plan. I've worked with East Devon District Council to make sure the money is there, and it will be done. Also, we need to make sure we have healthy choices and better transport links. The Sidbury to Sidford cycle route is an absolute priority for Devon County Council, and a planning application will be going in very soon. Local action, national action, not talk, not undeliverable promises, not shutting people down, getting on with the job.
This might be a tough one for you lot, I think, but we do realise that we are 1% of the global's output of CO2, and what we've really done is exported a lot of the CO2 we produce to China and places like that. Now, Reform certainly have got a green policy, but we want to roll back on net zero because it's costing us a lot of money for very little gain globally. So we're going to look at nuclear, alternative fuels. For instance, Simon mentioned hydrogen. Well, I see ammonia as the way forward, mainly because you can store it, unlike hydrogen. So there is many things that we would do at Reform, but we would look at a more sustainable economic model than just going for flat-out net zero. It's going to cost us all very dearly.
Okay, thank you all very much. So, can I ask for the next question that we have a very concise answer? Do you support closer ties with the European Union? If so, what steps do you and your party intend to take to forge a closer relationship with them? Hazel.
I've lost the will to answer that question, sorry.
I'm sorry. Right, I see. I'm sorry. Firstly, I should say, Hazel, I'm definitely interested in what you have to say about Europe and all other issues, I should say. But on Europe, I think the real pity that we have seen in recent years is that up until 2016, we were cooperating very effectively with our international neighbours in Europe. And then up until 2019, we were getting on well. And what we've seen under this Conservative government is a breaking of the ties with those who our bonds should be strongest with. The invasion of Ukraine has illustrated it in primary colours. These are our friends and our neighbours, and we need to work with them effectively. And specifically to answer your question, the Liberal Democrats are seeking ultimately to get back into the European single market so that we can put some fire back into our economy.
Simon.
Of course we need to work with our European neighbours, but we don't need to rejoin the EU. The worst of all worlds is rejoining the single market without being part of the EU. That is joining something we have no say over. It is ludicrous, but it is inevitably Lib Dem policy. We need to make sure that we have a good relationship with our European neighbours and work with them, and we are. And we've seen the benefits of leaving the European Union. This area voted to leave. The vaccination programme, you might not like it, but it's fact. The vaccination programme could have only happened because we left the European Union. I voted to remain in 2016, but I'm an actual Democrat. And I voted to leave when I became an MP because that's what the people decided. It's a fixed question. It's a good question, but it's a settled question, in my view.
Paul.
One thing Simon missed out on was that Boris was also able to support Ukraine very swiftly because we were out of the EU, which I think is well worth remembering. My answer is quite simple. I want out of the EU. We are a sovereign nation. That's the way we should stay.
Jake?
Thank you. I think, weirdly, I've just agreed with Simon on something, and I hope that doesn't happen much more. Anyway, I digress. We do need to remember, it is an important point, this area did vote to leave the UK, and as... the UK, Europe, blimmin' heck, must be the lights. But the UK, we did vote to leave Europe in this part of the country. I do disagree on one point, though. I don't think it's a settled matter, because I think the way it's been dealt with by this Conservative government has been an absolute shambles. I think what we need to do, I mean, it's very clear to me with Calais and Dover being, 22 miles apart, and Australia and New Zealand, which Jacob Rees-Mogg so loves with his apparent attempts at trade deals, are sort of thousands of miles away. We do need to look at resetting our relationship with the European Union. Our governments over the last 8 years have treated the European Union with absolute contempt. They are our neighbours, they are our partners. Labour will not be looking at re-entering the European Union, customs union or single market during this term. I think with the things that are going on in the world at the moment, that is not a question we should revisit at the moment. But we do need to look at resetting the relationship, looking at improving our trading relationship, tearing down the barriers that have been put up, including the VET agreement that I mentioned earlier. We need to help touring artists who are struggling at the moment across Europe. We need to seek a new UK-EU security pact as well, with the problems that we're facing across the world. And also, it's vital that we support institutions like the European Court of Human Rights and what they do.
Vanessa.
Well, there's not really a lot I can offer you in lots of it, because it's all politics. And I really didn't have any great understanding as to why us wanting to return to a sovereign nation really had to affect how we could trade with other countries in the world. It's purely down to bureaucracy and politics. And it's men bickering, and women as well, bickering in governments across the various European nations, coming up with rules that stopped us being able to carry on with the trade deals we already had. Why, just because we removed ourselves from sovereignty, did it have to create such great complications? And why was it not all organised before we actually left? It seems like it would have been a much more sensible way to go forward.
Thank you very much. So we've got to the end of the question. I'm going to ask one further question. We've not actually got through quite as many questions as I'd hoped. So, as I said earlier, what we will do is present those to the candidates for their written responses. But the final question I want to, which has been presented, is the Prime Minister has said his Hindu faith guides him through the election campaign. What faith, if any, guides you? And what inspired you to enter politics? And what life experience do you have to make a good MP for this constituency? Richard.
Well, firstly, I do have a faith, and when you enter Parliament for the first time, you are offered the opportunity either to swear your oath on the Bible, or indeed swear an oath to the King that is not religious. And I chose to swear mine on the Bible because I think that with the grave responsibility that is being a member of Parliament, you don't want to have to do it all alone. And you want to be able to think that there is perhaps a guiding power that is supporting you with some really responsible decisions. In terms of what experience that I can bring to the role, I humbly suggest that serving as an army major in Kosovo, in Bosnia, in Iraq, ultimately was about public service. And what I want to do today is to be your public servant here serving the people of Sidmouth. Thank you.
Simon, thank you.
My first job was a paperboy. I was terrible at it. I worked in a supermarket when I was younger. I couldn't do this job without having done that job. It built up and brought a shy guy out of his shell. And it's incredibly important to me that we respect people who work in those services. My background is that of a journalist, working for the BBC and ITV and in local radio. And what flicked in my head was when I saw a story happen about closing down the A&E service in Dorset, and I wanted to change it. The local MP got involved and changed the situation in the county. And what I wanted to do is I saw what good I could do. Rather than just writing stories, I wanted to help solve them. And that's why I got into politics. I've been a Conservative all my life. and always will be a Conservative, and I believe in personal responsibility, but also I believe in being a local champion for this area. If re-elected, that's exactly what I'll do, because that's exactly what I've been doing.
Thank you. Paul.
So I'm a non-practising Christian, hold Christian values very dear to my heart. I've been a working man all my life, and I do understand the true struggles people go through in family life, on lower incomes. So I am the working man the Labour talk about. So I want to represent people like myself, basically.
Thank you. Great.
I don't have a particular faith, I must admit. I'm keeping that open until the moment where I ascend into either heaven or descend very quickly into hell, wherever I'll end up. But I do think that this is a really important point, because it's about the ethics of your representative. And I'll give a little quick story, I promise, about why I want to get into politics. Obviously, during the COVID pandemic, we were struck with some extremely difficult circumstances. And one of the things that happened with me, because I'd already been interested in politics, it's something I'd wanted to do, but I very much had a national view on things, a sort of more naive national view. But once COVID happened, everything slowed down, and people started looking in their own communities, in their own neighbourhoods. How can we help those around us? How can we do unto ourselves that we would like to do unto that our neighbours would like to be done to? Or I think I've completely messed that up. Anyway, but what I said about doing is community action. I set up a food redistribution organisation in Honiton with a few of my friends and family, which has since grown to redistribute. I think so far this year it's redistributed 40 tonnes of food across the region. By region, I mean this constituency. But what got me into politics as opposed to that community action? I remember one cold December night in 2021 when we just started, and there was a group of 6 of us volunteering there, and a young mother and their newborn child turned up at the door of our food redistribution organisation and said, "I have nothing. I have no food to feed my kid. I have no access to a food bank. The emergency supplies had ran out. I don't know what to do." And that gave me an extreme sense of responsibility. The responsibility that we all hold as representatives of political parties, but also as community champions, in making sure that our communities are fit and thriving for the future. And it still makes me a little bit emotional today, and it will do for the rest of my life. But every time I make a political decision or I decide to go forward and do something, it's with her and her child in mind. I don't want the system to get worse for her. I want to be able to help and support her as a local representative, but also on the national scale. And if elected as your MP, I will continue to do that in our local area. Thank you.
I certainly believe that there's certainly a lot more to us than just this body. I'm not connected to any organised religion, but I've always been brought up with faith. My father was an atheist, but my mother certainly had a lot of faith. My father was very much a scientist. But I've been brought up with the sense that we always help uplift people and not ever put people down. And I've stood in community for all of my adult life, uplifting people. I've been in social services with adults with learning difficulties, worked in family centres and drop-ins, which no longer exist, thank you to the Conservative government. Working with helping parents with their parenting, helping young mothers know how to talk to their children instead of chastising their children, and uplift them instead of putting them down. I've had a health food business for the last 20 years where people come and ask me for advice, and they always leave with a smile and always leave with hope that they're going to actually get better, and they've got their own power in their own hands to help themselves with their own health. I've helped in so many ways in just uplifting, because we can all uplift, and so much more than just putting each other down. The reason I've stood, I'm not a politician. I never even thought I'd go into politics. When the Rishi Sunak announced the election, I just had not an epiphany, but an inspiration to stand, to say, I can do this. I've got a vast experience through my life in working with committees, with getting projects off the ground, with lifting up schools that were falling down and helping them get back on their feet, lifting up people in home care, helping them get back on their feet. I've been a pillar in our own community through Ottery St Mary and through Seaton. I don't think there's anyone, not necessarily everyone likes me, but I certainly don't think anyone would say that I'm a bad person and that they don't respect me. So I know I've got what it takes to be a politician. I certainly could stand up to any of these guys in the room without any trouble at all. And I think as an independent, I don't have to be influenced by a party that I'm going to have to toe a party line to. And I will speak out, and I will speak up, and I will not be silenced. And that's why I'm standing as a candidate in this election.
Okay, so my faith, I think, is a faith in humanity, in ordinary men and women. And my greatest qualification for the job, I think, is that I'm not a politician and I don't like politics. And I think it was only about 3 weeks ago, if you'd said to me that I would be standing in a general election, I would have laughed at you. But I really think that this transgender issue, talk about that for you, which has captured everything, is so damaging to our society. It's a very bedrock on which we should be able to rest, to know what is a man, what is a woman. And most of these politicians, when they're asked on national television, can't tell you what a man or a woman is. They're too embarrassed because they don't want to be attacked by the cancel culture, by the people who make it their business to destroy people who dare to speak out. So what I want is for everybody, vote for me, yes please, but mainly speak up whenever you see anything about any topic that you think is wrong. Don't be silent, don't be compliant, speak up. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the question part of the session. So we're going to move on now to the final remarks. As I promised, I would read out the Green statement. The candidate is unable to be here today, but he has given us a statement which I will now read. Many Green Party supporters will vote tactically in this constituency to defeat the Tory. We understand that position. Elsewhere in the country, the Green Party hope to have their best ever general election, and we want as many people as possible to vote Green. The more votes we gain nationally, the more people will listen to us in the future. In this constituency, if you normally vote Conservative and don't want to switch to Lib Dem, please consider voting Green. That will give out the message of a hope for the future, of confidence that we can overcome the challenges of climate change, inequality and exclusion. It will give out a message that you love your country and want to leave it to the next generation in a better state than it was when you found it. You care for your legacy. You want the best for Britain. So that concludes the statement for the Green Party. So I now invite each of the candidates to respond with a final 2-minute presentation, starting with Paul.
Thank you very much. I'm with a panel of far better orators than myself, so I will just end with asking you to just go on the Reform website and take a look at their manifesto. Thank you very much.
Simon.
Thank you for coming this evening. It's an important part of democracy to quiz your candidates, meet them, see what they're about, and see what they stand for. Freedom of speech is one of them. I wish all people on this panel this evening felt the same way. My plan for our part of Devon is about protecting and improving local healthcare, getting a better deal for local people, securing even more investment for our part of Devon, safer streets and more community patrols, looking after our precious environment and supporting our local farmers. Many of these issues were touched on this evening. I have a record of delivery, which I've talked about this evening. I want to be re-elected so I can deliver more for you and work with you as someone who lives here and truly cares about this community. Thank you.
Richard.
Well, when I was first standing for election in the Honiton constituency 2 years ago, I said that I would bang the drum for Devon, and that's what I have done in the last 2 years in Parliament. I've been the 20th most outspoken Member of Parliament since I was trusted to represent people in East Devon. And on the 5th of July, I suggest that you have been liberated. You have been liberated to think, the day after polling day, you have been liberated to think beyond it, to not just who do I least want to be my Prime Minister, because that's already settled. We know by looking at the polls that they already indicate that the Prime Minister will either be Starmer or Sir Keir Starmer. And so, given that a Labour majority is in the offing, you now have the freedom to decide to elect a Liberal Democrat MP who's going to put your interests first. Thank you.
Thank you. Hazel.
So I've already said that I don't like politics, but I do really value our tradition of democracy and our democratic parliament in this country. So I'm really pleased to see that there is such a variety of candidates for you, the voters in this constituency, to choose between. So exercise your vote wisely. We don't have to put up with the same broke system. And in your everyday lives, challenge things that you think is wrong, the things that you think are wrong. Thank you.
Okay, Vanessa.
I agree with Hazel. The system is broken, and I think the only way we're going to move forwards, in my own humble opinion, is to actually go completely independent and cut out party politics altogether. Stop the backstabbing, stop the sniping, stop the put-downs, and just actually get on with the action and get on with doing what needs to be done. Without party politics involved and without politics involved, full stop, I think maybe the people with a voice in Parliament, a true voice in Parliament that represents them, with people on the ground who are very self-effacing, who aren't going, I've done all this and I've done all that, because I've done a lot, but I've not been on camera or in politics saying so, and just take action. We need to stop talking and actually take action. And I'd really, really ask for you all to vote an independent and get the power back into the hands of the people.
Jake.
When you cast your votes over the next couple of weeks, and especially on July 4th, I want you to think about July 5th, Friday, July 5th, when you wake up in the morning after the general election. How will you feel if we get 5 more years of the same chaos and division that we've had since 2019? For the last 14 years, we've had, I've lost count how many prime ministers we've had. And we've had politicians who have been in office less than it's taken a lettuce to wilt. We've had in the double-digit numbers of education secretaries and whatnot across the country, and that is not stable government. And I want you to think about your vote and how that should be used. Because it is a really big question. Obviously, looking at the opinion polls, it would suggest that Labour may be in government after July 4th. But it is important to recognise no vote has been cast in this election. No vote will be counted until after 10 o'clock on July 4th. On that day, and over the next couple of weeks, when postal votes start to drop tomorrow, it is imperative that people use their vote and use their vote wisely. If I'm elected as your MP, I want to be elected as an MP on the government benches. I don't want to sit there as an MP on the opposition benches as a protest voice. I want to be able to hold the Labour Party, if they were to get elected, to account. And I want to make sure we have the best deal for Honiton and Sidmouth in government. On July 4th, vote Labour. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for those final comments. So I want to thank the candidates for their candid and frank answers to all the questions tonight, and also to thank you all for submitting questions to us, which I hope we've at least been able to represent some of those in the questions that we have asked. Also, thanks to All Saints for hosting or for making this venue available to us. We really appreciate that, and also for stewards, the guys up there on the sound box and so on, for doing that. So thank you all very much, and thank you. And thank you all very much for attending, and we'll close this session. Thank you.